Selah. Just reminding you there's power in the blood of the Lamb. Here on AM 930 The Light, Edmonton's Positive Talk. Our scripture for today is 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse number 9. Listen to what Paul says. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast of all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. So there are times where you're asking God, you say, God, would you deliver me from this situation? Would you deliver me? Would you come into this situation and take me out of it? And in those moments, the Lord just says, hey, listen, my grace is sufficient for you. Now, it was interesting yesterday morning at the church there at Cornerstone in St. Albert. I was talking about the wondrous grace of God. And grace basically in the acronym means God's riches at Christ's expense. And an interesting fact when we talk about the grace of God, we're talking about the sufficient power to bring you through through any situation that you find yourself in. Now, what Paul was looking, he says, Lord, I have a thorn in my flesh. There's something that I'm dealing with right now. And he asked the Lord 3 different times about it. And the Lord answered him the same way. He said, my grace is sufficient for you in that situation. Basically, what the Lord was saying, I'm not taking this thing away from you because there's something you need to learn from this situation. He says, my grace will give you the power, the enablement, and the authority to deal with it every single day. Now, here was Paul. He says, for my power is made perfect in weakness. What he's basically saying is the power of God will be with you in every situation. Sometimes God doesn't take you out of a situation right now. Now, there is the promise, of course, that he will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able to endure, but with a temptation, a means of escape. But what he's saying too is there are situations that you can live through, and when you come out the other side, you're going to be stronger, more resourceful, more creative, and much, much wiser. He says, therefore, I will boast all the more about my weaknesses. He knew that God could actually turn this weakness into a testimony. Now, you may have heard of Joni Eareckson Tada. Now, when she was just a teenager, she dove into a lake, and the results of that accident was that she was paralyzed for the rest of her life. Now, some would say that's a terrible thing to happen, but Joni Eareckson Tada has actually been an inspiration of God's grace and God's power. Through that situation, she has developed a worldwide ministry, and God has used her to inspire. And yet, she's never gotten out of the wheelchair. And there's been a lot of questions about why God did it. But you know what? Joni often said, she says, I may not understand all the things that God is doing, but she says, in my wheelchair, I have traveled the world and I've touched millions. And maybe that's what God may do in your situation. He may be using you and your situation to actually be an inspiration to others. He says, so that Christ's power may rest on me. The whole issue was, as far as Paul was concerned, is he wanted the power of God to be resting upon him. So he knew, he said, listen, the grace of God is sufficient for your situation. God's power will be made perfect through your weakness. And he says, in that weakness, he says, God's glory will be shown. And he says, also, that power will rest upon you. God will be with you in every situation. What you need to do is be like old Job. He says, even though he slays me, I will trust him. Will you trust God today for your situation? Will you trust God to give you the victory in every situation, no matter what it is today? Paul did, and you can as well. AM 930 The Light is Edmonton's Positive Talk.